I want to follow up on what Senator Cardin just said and Senator Menendez a minute ago, because I think this is an important point. It is for me. When I came to the Senate, and came to the Foreign Relations Committee, the first legislation of any import at all was the New START Treaty. And I got very involved in it because of, I think, the responsibility it put on me. Because of everything else we dealt with, that was the most important thing we could do: arms control, verification, limitations of arms with us and Russia. And so I got really into the weeds, probably too deep for a real estate salesman to be able to comprehend, but I did anyway. And I finally voted for it. And I did so because it was clearly evident there was no other agreement that we were into with any other adversary or potential adversary or ally in the world that had better verification, better mandated access for the United States of America, and better access for them than us. Am I right on that?
I would agree with that, Senator.
Well, I want to carry that forward. We did this, I can't remember, what of the mess we did with Iran here, that, as Ben said, did not have any verification in it, or the verification in it said we couldn't verify on military bases and things of that nature. It had gaping holes in it, which is why I voted against it, or wanted to vote against it, because it just didn't add anything to our country's security whatsoever. It diminished it in comparison to what we agreed with Russia on the START Treaty. So my point is, and I understand, Secretary, you don't want to give away negotiating positions with the Russians. When you answer his question or my question about the START Treaty, you don't want to say anything that would cede a point. You might have to negotiate the negotiations. But I too agree with what he said. We ought to be a little bit more pro continuing the benefits the START Treaty gives us, rather than getting the idea there might be some way we'd get out of it, because I think knowledge and access is tremendous. We have no notice access. We have Russians in the United States who have access to come inspect our sites, us in Russia. We have a unique hologram system on the warheads, so we can count the warheads and what they can do and where they are. We can catch them and then catch us. I mean, if we just insisted at the table with the Iranians, we have a treaty on nuclear weapons with Russia, the two largest nuclear powers in the world. We want to put those verifications in our agreement with you, Iran. And we'll let Iran, you have be able to inspect ours, and we want to come in and inspect yours. Unfettered, no access. It was a perfect predicate to do that. Secretary Kerry decided not to do it in that way, but it would have been a great way to get that foot in the door. So all I'm trying to say is, when you get worried about compromising your future by talking about what you might get out of if you didn't like it, you run the risk of letting them think they could get out from under the responsibility it puts on them. And they'd be a lot more willing to take advantage of it than we would. I just wanted to make that point. Second point, and I would like to ask both of you to answer this question. On the Space Force, when the Vice President announced the Space Force and the President's announced the Space Force, and you acknowledged some of the experimentation the Russians have done in space of a defensive nature, but potentially offensive as well, would you equalize the Space Force enthusiasm that you've seen so far in our government day to be equal to what was the missile defense system of the Reagan administration?
Senator Isakson, I don't think we're currently considering a missile defense capability similar to what was proposed during the Reagan administration. But in terms of the Space Force, the Department of Defense is certainly committed to going forward and implementing the vision expressed by the President and the Vice President also, in terms of moving out expeditiously and appropriately to develop those capabilities, given the importance of space to our national defense.
I was hoping that was going to be your answer, because when you'd addressed it in your remarks, and I've seen some of the other pieces and read some of the stuff about it, the Space Force is the modern day answer to the missile defense system that Reagan used. Reagan used missile defense as an idea for the future that scared the hell out of the Russians, and in fact led to their spending on defense, which put them in the difficulty they fell into in the early 1990s when they did it. So I think having the Space Force recognized as a future addition to our defense or offense, militarily and diplomatically, is as equally good a potential tool as missile defense was in its infancy and has been since. And I applaud the administration's boldness in doing that, and I hope it will be something that's a meaningful tool and not a paper tiger.